Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen and Aidan, for their brilliant performance to get us to kick off our evening as part of Fleadh Ceoil hÉireann. And that is, I'm afraid, pretty much all my Irish used up. So I won't disrespect the language by messing around with it. Oh my God. Is this brilliant or is this brilliant this whole week? Who would have thought Belfast could put on such a show? As somebody said to me last night, I was up at the gig rig, and they said, I can't believe we haven't f***ed it up yet. So, here's how we start 10 by 9. Good evening, welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Doran, and tonight our theme is tradition. And it's not about Irish tradition, it's about whatever your tradition is. And we have some stories that are very much on theme and some that are slightly more abstract, shall we say. I have been more excited about this 10 by 9, I can tell you, than I have been for a long time. I even had a dream about it the other night, and there were something like 42 people turned up for the 10 by 9, and I'm like, oh, phew. But you didn't let me down. Okay, let's kick off with the first of our 9 stories on the theme tradition. So please, a big warm welcome for Maureen Boyle.
I have a vivid memory of standing on the Melmount Road in Strabane on a summer evening in 1978, the light in the west, knowing that lots of the older youngsters in the town were heading off to Lisdoonvarna, while I was left behind. Too young to go, but longing for what seemed impossibly romantic and daring. And much of that sense of longing for me was bound up in the music itself. I didn't grow up with traditional music. In fact, it was treated quite sneeringly in our house because my father was a classical musician and didn't know or understand the form. But then I fell in love. I was 17 and bookish and writing poetry and in a convent school, Loreto in Omagh, 20 miles from where I lived in Sound Mills. That meant a bus journey every day, there and back in all weathers. The romantic possibilities were unpromising, but the question always arose of getting a seat. And one day, a young man kept a seat for me, and that was the start of something. He was going to the Christian Brothers in Omagh, and he was a musician. Some days he busked on the streets to make a bit of money, and there was something irresistibly adult in the smells of smoke, vodka, and the outsides on him when he climbed on the bus to go home. He was thin with white, lean wrists, which became a focus of my attention when they held the neck of the bouzouki, when he bent over and played with such intensity. There was a catch, of course. There's always a catch. He was headed to Maynooth to be a priest. I was already an atheist, but there was something hugely attractive among a busload of smelly teenage boys shouting, cursing, sweating, to be locked in the privacy of a high Ulsterbus seat, snuggled down, talking about St. Augustine, while blazing sunrises happened outside the window on the way to school and blood-red winter sunsets on the way home. For some reason, perhaps because of his vocation, we initially never saw each other outside of the bus. He was a year ahead of me, so I had another year of school to get through. But before he left, I bought him a crucifix on a silver chain, and he kissed me on my 18th birthday before heading away. I wrote a letter telling him how I felt, then stashed it in my room and didn't send it. But then, almost a year later, in June, a miraculous thing happened, as if I conjured it. He wrote me at the end of his first year in Maynooth, asking if I'd see him that summer. I was working in the local libraries in Strabane, and when I'd finished work, we'd meet in pubs in the afternoons to resume the intense conversations of the bus journeys, me still frustrated that he was intent on the priesthood. Somehow all of the longing in that relationship became bound up for me in the songs he played in my front room with his brothers when I was finally able to bring him home that summer. I thought the lakes of Pontchartrain unconscionably sad, but I thought the line, "If it weren't for the alligators, I'd sleep out in the woods," the greatest of seduction lines. These songs often seem to be about women losing their maidenheads or wishing to, and I was with them in all that longing. More seriously, I loved the songs that took us back to the 17th or 18th centuries or further, full of soldiers heading off to war, women waiting for them to return, or sometimes dressing up to go after them. It is probably the planksties I loved best. The word came into English from the 18th century, possibly from the same Latin root as plague, plangere, to strike, and meaning originally a lively tune for the harp that was spirited and animated. It also provided the name of the group I first heard this kind of music from. And my friend explained that Andy HÉireann had gone off to Bulgaria and brought back the strange and poignant tunes that the songs of longing often morphed into. I think the longing of the songs, often transgressive and daring, matched perfectly the sexual longing of those early teenage years. So many of the songs were about trying to outwit mothers and fathers. The jolly beggar man who's given a bed by the kitchen fire and entices the farmer's daughter when she comes to lock up the house. Or the man who is lowered in the creel into the daughter's bed in As I Roved Out, her mother entreating the father repeatedly, "There's a man in your daughter's bed." For all the longing, I wasn't in my friend's bed. I was too young and he was set on celibacy. That summer, when I did my A-levels, I went, despite my atheism, to Lough Derg with my friends to pray for good results, which was a tradition in our school. I told my father I was just going to observe and write a poem about it like Paddy Kavanagh. He told me I'd have to do all the things that everybody else did, and he was right. We had a great time, and I loved the lost beauty of the place, the starkness and the pain. And then it came to confession, and I thought, well, I'll go in and ask for advice about what to do loving a clerical student. And before I could go into any detail, the priest said, "You're Maureen from Strabane." And he was laughing and saying, "It's a gas." And I could see his big hands holding his head through the grill as he thought it was a great joke altogether. He was my friend's spiritual director in Maynooth. It was a bit embarrassing coming out of that booth since we'd made so much noise. I'm sure the other people wondered what monumental sins I'd committed and what my penance was. Despite the songs being traditional, women often had agency in them, though usually it has to be said it was agency to choose death for love. Hence, in Anarchy Gordon, Jeannie refuses to marry the Sultan, who would style her as mistress, and dies for the love of Anarchy, who is far at sea. In the Ballad of the Little Musgrave, a song written by Andy Irvine from the words of an old ballad that Christy Moore found in a bookshop on the Quays, the little Musgrave falls for Lord Barnard's wife, the fairest of them all. They confess mutual love for each other and steal away to the beautifully alliterative bar in Buckelsford Bury, only to be betrayed by the little foot page and slain by Lord Bernard, who ends the song by admitting, "I've just killed the greatest knight that ever rode a steed, and I've just killed the finest woman that ever did a woman's deed." My clerical student and I had a more prosaic ending. I promised to wait for him, but by the time he gave up on the priesthood, I was with someone else in Trinity. But the love of the music stayed. Years later, a band in the Surfers' Bar of the Sandhouse in Rusnowla announced that they were going to play "I Know How You Feel, But the Grass Is Too Wet." Which I thought the perfect acknowledgement of the subtext of so much of this music. And a few years and a few men later, I'd walk up the aisle of the registry office in City Hall to O'Carolyn's beautiful Eleanor Plunkett, and Davy Hammond would sing a version of The Wild Rover to my new husband, but that, as they say, is an scéal eile.
Part of the reason I was so desperate to do a 10 by 9 in the Fleadh is because I genuinely believe two of the things we really have given to the world, we have that amazing traditional music and dance that I was watching some of it on Sunday up at the gig rig, and it was just incredible. But also storytelling. Now I know every culture has storytelling in it. We did not invent storytelling, but it's something we still hold very dear, and so I just thought there needed to be a storytelling element in the Fleadh. And as you know, we don't do the traditional storytelling. We're not into myths and legends, brilliant and all of that is. We want to hear from real people, and we want to remove as many obstacles that prevent people from getting up and telling their story, which is why we're more than happy for people to bring notes. It's a big ask, even for our more seasoned storytellers. It's a big ask to ask anyone to come up and tell a story without notes in front of, well, I don't know how many people we have here tonight, 180, 200, and it's fantastic. So that's what 10 by 9 is all about. The nervous, the shy, and the reluctant, of which I am all three. The Fleadh is so much about music, and I think stories and music go so well together, and songs are all about storytelling. But I met somebody earlier, and she was wandering around with her fiddle case, and I said, well, we've got music at the start, so if you're up for it, do you want to do a wee tune for us before the final three stories? And she said yes. So please, a big 10 by 9 welcome for Sarah Hughes.
When I was a teenager, my fiddle and I were at a session in the Dunlow Bar in Derry, and not knowing entirely what I was saying, when it came to my turn, I asked the people sitting there if they wanted a quickie or a slow, or a slowie. So anyway, this is a slowie, and I'd like to dedicate it to Glenn Hansard.
Big warm welcome for Houdi McCabe.
From the age of 6, after a period in junior infants with the Stoic nuns, I attended a primary school in Clones, County Monaghan. It was a tiny building under the bailiwick of the Sacred Heart Catholic Church, juxtaposed with St. Ciearnach's GAA Stadium. Everything encompassing the building had the whiff of Irish patriotism. All classrooms displayed the 1916 proclamation, eulogising the 7 signatories who were, without mercy, executed by the evil British government. An image burned into my consciousness was Pádraig Pearse, who I imagined was very shy, as he only appeared to have half a face, as if afraid to look at the camera. In 5th class, under the tutelage of a fanatical teacher, we had to stand to attention while he made us sing the national anthem, the soldier song in Irish. Our bodies stiff as the cane he battered us with, should we miss a single note. He lamented about how the imperialists tied James Connolly to a chair before executing him in cold blood. We were reminded how the Black and Tans went on rampage in Cork City in 1920, razing it to the ground until there was nothing left. As a child, I could never understand how you could raze a city to the ground by destroying it. In final year, 6th class, the headmaster was less acerbic about the invaders from the mainland, but he did lecture us on how perfidious Albion left a trail of destruction in its wake. The phrase went over my head, as in my naivety I thought perfidious Albion was a soccer team in the English 3rd Division. In reflection, this indoctrination was not unlike Hitler's youth of the 1930s. Thus, it was inevitable that pupils had a nationalist ethos pumping through their veins. It was in this context that I was listening to my father at the dinner table going apoplectic about the British Parachute Regiment slaughtering 13 civilians on what became known as Bloody Sunday on the 30th of January 1972. I loved and feared my father in equal measure. In his ubiquitous black trench coat, he was a cross between Al Capone, a rebellious Bullock, and Desperate Dan from the Dandy comic. His enormous belly strained his trouser braces without a scintilla of mercy. A staunch member of the Fianna Fáil, the Republican Party, when he spoke, everyone listened. To this day, I'm uncertain as to whether that was out of fear or respect. The day after Bloody Sunday, he spread a copy of the Irish newspaper on the kitchen table, poring over every column inch that seemed to report only on the massacre in Derry. At random, he uttered expletives about how the innocent were mowed down, unarmed by those evil British bastards who should get what's coming to them. My father was now saying, with great conviction, what my teachers were espousing in a school managed by the Catholic Church. The Republic reaction to the massacre was the destruction of the British Embassy in Dublin, with protest marches held in most towns throughout the country. There was one such demonstration held in my hometown. The image of protesters carrying 13 black coffins adorned with white crosses has never left me. It was as if the entire population in the town was in unison with their outrage against the British, and in particular, the Secretary of State, chanting, "William Whitelaw is an outlaw." I told my mother I was at the march, but she didn't seem to share the zeitgeist, advising me to steer clear of any future demonstrations, adding, "This will not end well, son." I didn't really understand what she meant. In October the previous year, the British Army started cratering and spiking what they deemed as unapproved roads in order to thwart IRA attacks from the Republic of Ireland. Over 60 border roads were closed, causing considerable inconvenience to local transport, commerce and farming. There was a physical response to this foreign hindrance, with local community refilling the roads using mechanical diggers or earth movers. This encouraged conflict with the British Army, who responded, dispersing the protesters with rubber bullets and CS gas. It became a weekend activity, with local groups formed to replace each other on a rota basis. This enterprise gained traction in the aftermath of Bloody Sunday. A local milkman with Sinn Féin leanings seemed to energise a lot of the younger people, including me. He used his milk lorry to ferry ewes to and from the areas of conflict. On Sunday, March the 5th, I, along with 3 of my classmates, decided to do something for my country, just like what my teacher said Pearse and Connolly did 50 years earlier. There was a road cratered at Mullinhinch, near the townland of Ahafin in Clonus on the border with Rosslea, County Fermanagh. 200 people gathered to refill the road. As soon as the mechanical diggers appeared, the army replied with rubber bullets and CS gas canisters. The battle lasted about 2 hours with no fatalities on either side. There were some injuries from rubber bullets, with the gas causing eye irritation, exacerbated as people applied rags soaked in vinegar to ease the impact. Being in the middle of the demonstration, I lifted a gas canister which burnt my eyes. Someone took me home, giving me the empty canister as a souvenir, but my eyes were red raw. My mother was close to fainting, warning me not to mention it to my father. She sent me to bed early with the latest dandy comic. I didn't understand her reaction. I was James Connolly now, except I didn't need a chair. The next day, my father came home early from work with a copy of the Irish Independent newspaper in his hand. This was most unusual, as he on several occasions referred to that publication as a blue shirt rag. He wouldn't let it into the house. Employing an avuncular tone, he says, "Is this you, son?" I looked at the front page to witness my image, lifting a CS gas canister, holding it like in the air like a flare. I felt like a celebrity. Yes, Daddy! My body erect with pride, I presented him with the empty gas canister like a prized trout. He slapped it out of my hand that hard, it hit Jesus' Sacred Heart red light before bouncing off the framed JFK portrait. He slapped me from head to toe for about 30 seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. It was as if I had ran through a field of nettles. I told him, I want to be like James Connolly. I was paying their British back. He was having none of it, roaring at me. You could have been killed, son, running around with the scum of the town. He left the house, almost taking the door off the hinges, my mother in total shock at what she witnessed. Whatever about James Connolly, I felt like Porrick Pierce, forced to stare sideways because I couldn't turn my neck. It was that sore. My mother made me fresh cocoa before I went to bed, totally numb with shock. The next day at school, our class was interrupted by a visit from the cassocked canon, the boss of the school. He wanted to know what boys in the class attended Ahafin the day before. No pupil would leave the building until the culprits owned up. As nobody admitted guilt, he said he was cancelling the sports day. Further punishment of shorter dinner breaks was also threatened. I confessed that I was there unaccompanied. He called me up in front of the class, slapping me on both cheeks, calling me a thug. I was shaking in fear that much I was approaching incontinence. The other perpetrators remained silent. He told me to report to the parochial house after class. As he left the room, I glanced at Pierce in his frame, with tears blinding me. I looked to his left to read the words of the 1916 proclamation. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generation from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. The headmaster never spoke a word through the entire episode, nor did he look at me for the rest of the day. After class, I went up to see the canon, who at first was receptive as he groomed me for the names of the other boys. I never gave them up. He beat me with great enthusiasm. I still didn't give them up. He started to beat me a second time, at which I bolted out of the house, running down the road, absolutely terrified. I never told my mother or father about the whole episode. 2 months later, my father was admitted to hospital in County Cavan. The next time I saw him, he was staring out of his coffin. At home that night, my mother wiped the tears from my eyes. I looked to the wall on my right to see the photograph. My father playing his trumpet at the parade of the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Rising in Monaghan, with the tricolours blocking the sunlight in the background.
Please, a big warm welcome. It's Judith McGillion.
Friday night was Irish dancing class. The older brother had been going for a couple of years, and now that I was in P1, it was decided that I should go too. The brother would reluctantly walk with me past the wooded Skerry McClintock's forest, down to the parochial hall to the Irish dancing class. I could see that he frustrated the life out of our dance teacher, because he had rhythm and he could do the steps, but he was just a messer of a cub, just like the other few lads who went to the class. I was very different by nature. I wanted to do well, to please the teacher, and I picked up the steps with ease. Before long, I was competing in the local fish, and I loved the nerves and the excitement backstage as you waited to go on and perform for the adjudicator. Before long, I was winning medals and even a few trophies. This bespectacled, short-haired Irish dancer was definitely a novelty on those competition stages, as I was surrounded by long-haired ringlets and the bows and the ribbons. As I was improving as a dancer, so too was the commitment needed by the parents to ensure that I had the correct footwear and the socks and the costumes, and to be on time at the many halls around the northwest for these fashes. It was becoming costly too for the parents, but they made sure that I got what was required. My memories of Irish dancing and primary school are all positive, apart from the one time I got smacked by the teacher. A robust spinster woman who appeared to hate children but had decided to become a primary school teacher. The incident just happened after we had said our morning prayers too. A real stand-up citizen within the local Catholic community. There was no youth club in the town, but there was brownies, and my dad thought that I should join. It was great fun, and I really enjoyed it. I was a sucker for structured play and routine, and the brownies provided that. I was not a fan of the brown dress. That was just child abuse. But I was now the epitome of everything that represented good cross-community relations in a small town 1980s Northern Ireland. I was all over the, we're brownie guides, we're here to lend a hand, to love our God, to serve our Queen, and help our homes and land. I mean, I was well used to learning things off by heart, like the Our Father and the Hail Mary and the Glory Be and the Apostles' Creed and the Act of Contrition. So, cut to a school morning shortly after I had joined the Brownies, and my classmates and I were stood up to get ready to slowly parrot aloud the Our Father. I was in a wee world of my own. As we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the... She had walked over, and with my angelic hands held together, she slapped them. And she goes, "That's not the Our Father." Well, like, that's your opinion. I was in shock. It took me a few minutes to realise what I had done. Oh, the Brownies' Our Father was different from St. Patrick's Primary's Our Father. Lesson learnt. My growing awareness of being an anomaly in this town, being an Irish dancer and a Brownie, continued for a couple of years. We lived in a mixed housing estate of mainly Protestant families and a few number of Catholics. But everyone was very neighbourly. Well, for the most part of the year, except for July and August. That is, the parade season. Everyone just kept themselves to themselves. Now, one of our neighbours had a son who was about 18, and he spent most of his time between cleaning and pumping up his Vauxhall Cavalier to boy race around the town and practising his flute all year round, ready to march and tootle his flute all through the summer. I watched David from afar, proudly dressed in his Red Hand Defender's uniform. I was scared of orange bands from no age. It was like the thudding of the drums and the aggressive manly chanting and the whistle blowing. That all just sent me running up the stairs and hiding under the bed every Saturday night of the parade season. As summer was approaching in the Brownies and the nights were becoming longer, activities were moved out of the hall to the lovely surroundings of the field nearby, where we would continue to play the games. And all the older girl guides and their male friends would sit around and enjoy the crack. It was good crack, and even though I was too young, I was very aware of the all-round teenage flirting that was going on. A few of these boys had brought their musical instruments from their bands to impress the girls and show off. In amongst the troop was my neighbour David. I'd never spoken with David in my entire life. He was very striking looking with his bleach blonde spiky hair. The Brownies had finished for the evening, and I was the last one awaiting my lift. The girl guides had all gone into the hall to start their session, and gradually the boys all departed. The blonde, spiky-haired David called my name and signalled for me to come over to him at the side of the Presbyterian Church Hall. And even though he was on his own now, I did go over to him. I was about 9 or 10 years old. "You do Irish dancing, don't you?" I nodded, and he lifted up his flute and asked if I would listen to him play. He looked kind of embarrassed by this, clearly not wanting his peers to see this cultural creative exchange. He said, "I don't know if it's right, like." He played a couple of bars of a gorgeous reel, and he tapped his foot in time. He played really well before he stopped sharply. He asked me, would I be able to dance to it? And I said yes. So he sat back down on the step of the hall and he got himself comfortable. And I took my position, hands by my side, right foot flexed, toes pointed, ready to go. He tapped his foot and began to play a beautiful reel, and I happily danced along to it. We smiled and carried on until he indicated that he was finished. I pointed my toe and bowed, as I always did at the end of a competition. He smiled at me and he said thanks, and we walked away from each other. My dad had arrived to collect me. I don't think I ever spoke to David in my life again. I saw him plenty of times marching past with his band of brothers tooting the sash. And as I got older, I knew my straddling both worlds of the Brownies and the Irish dancing could not carry on. I felt increasingly lonely at the Brownies because I didn't go to school with these girls and their bond was growing. I didn't even share with my friends at school about going to the Brownies either. I look back at that time with a melancholic fondness because my father always saw the importance of expanding your world and the value of engaging in community. For the time it took to play a tune on a flute and dance a reel, it felt that boundaries could be broken down and sharing identity part of a way forward. And almost 40 years later, I would say to everyone to listen, play the tune, and let the other come and dance.
Oh, Judith. What an amazing way to send us home. Brilliant. Okay, and a big thank you to the wonderful people of this fantastic venue. This is an amazing place. We've been 10 by 9's been using this place since 2011. The team tonight was Darren, was led by Darren, and they did a brilliant job on the bar because so many people really, really did. And we had the wonderful Ellie up in the box doing all the sound and the vision for us. So thanks, Ellie. And I have to say a big thank you. I know many of you are gone already, which is a pity. I want to say a big thank you to you, the audience, because you have been so brilliant. You have been so responsive. You're so supportive. You are amazing. There's not a sound to be heard when people are telling their stories. And honestly, for anybody who's standing up here, including me, that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think you're brilliant. So please give yourselves a round of applause. Come on. But the biggest thank you tonight, of course, goes to Maureen Boyle, Tovey Kane, Kieran McAlinden, Willa Murphy, Rania Shara-Lampadu, Richard Brown, Pat Scott, Houdi McCabe, and Judith McGillion for their amazing stories of tradition. I'm Paul Doran. This was 10 by 9. Good night.